Hello, Simone. We recently did an episode on an undercover reporter who was investigating us for at least a year. Now it appears we were wrong, and that this, who we thought was an undercover reporter, might have actually been a spy working for the British government. Other people have collected tons of evidence that suggests this already, but we basically collected the quote unquote final piece of evidence that the other people who have been collecting evidence on this organization for a long time reviewed. And it's like, this basically seals the case that this is an organization used by British intelligence to try to put out a parallel narrative. And so we did something that pissed off the deep state bad.
What's it thinking, Colonel?
It's afraid. It's afraid!
But it gets worse than that, because what we're going to explore here is how the deep state was captured by the mind virus so much that taxpayer dollars could be used through authoritative, fascist-like, government systems to track down everyday citizens fighting for citizens' freedoms, fighting for the right for humanity to continue to exist, and attempt to F up their lives.
Yeah, because a lot of the people that Hope Not Hate have doxed, their biggest crime seems to just be not towing the narrative. Now, I wouldn't say that neither of us would endorse the views of everyone that Hope Not Hate as an organization has outed or criticized. However, it does seem like a lot of the people they've outed are their crime is not towing a leftist narrative.
Yeah, so other people have noticed this as well. They claim to be a group that's against anti-Semitism, and yet they have done nothing on the left right now with the huge amounts of anti-Semitism that we are seeing on the streets of London and from the mouths of MPs, and yet they do nothing. So, it's once anti-Semitism was normalized on the left, we're like, oh, we're going to throw that out. That's not really one of those things we're fighting anymore. I wanted to say in the words of one of our commenters on this, and I thought that they described this organization very well. And this is somebody from the UK who's had some experience with the organization. Hope Not Hate appears to be viscerally hostile to anything or anybody that represents genuine human interaction, humor, and popular democratic pushback to the ruling oligarchy. They're probably funded, I'm guessing here, by global corporations and institutions. It's not, by the way, it's the UK government. They say they're not, but we have receipts proving they are, who dislike agency of citizens and genuine popular democracy because it gets in their way. It seems like their funders' aim is to maintain the status quo in which all mainstream political parties are captured, controlled, and flat out refuse to represent ordinary voters. Incidentally, the idiot Hope Not Hate radical activists probably think you two are monsters, but their shadowy and cynical funders won't believe their propaganda. Vote Simone. So basically, what he's saying is the article that Hope Not Hate did on it is not that bad. I actually don't have any beef with them as human beings. I think that the guy was probably...
The guy we met with seemed like a nice person.
He's probably a well-meaning guy who just got wrapped up in this ideology and doesn't realize that he's fighting for the fascists and the oligarchs now.
Yeah, I think that's how it is with many people on the left, is they're pro-social, well-meaning people. Many of them want the best for humanity, want human flourishing. This undercover reporter still came across as a nice, intelligent guy with thoughtful comments that was, he came across as a little racist, which made us somewhat uncomfortable. But
what it does appear is there is concrete evidence that this is an arm of the deep state. The deep state is scared of our growing movement, the new right, the pronatalists. And then if Trump wins, hopefully we can begin to dismantle the deep state.
Will the brain bug reveal? Federal scientists are working around the clock to probe its secrets. Once we understand the bug, we will defeat it.
I want to emphasize here, though, how meaningful this is, because I think we used to joke about the deep state possibly going after people for having the wrong narrative or for not supporting them. but I never really believed that could possibly be true. It seems that now there's some evidence that this actually is happening.
There's
That is
overwhelming
big.
evidence, but that's actually not the evidence we're gonna go into a ton today, because there's actually more evidence about this than we're gonna go into here. But let's just start with a write-up. So this is
Mm.
from Raw Egg Nationalist, where he's going through his own research on this, because he was one of the people who was doxxed by Hope Not Hate. And I'm gonna be heavily summarizing this. I spoke to a number of people who said there must be an intelligence connection at work. This included people with backgrounds in the military and intelligence themselves. When I told them what happened at the farm shop, they were convinced. No way that was a coincidence. Quote unquote, somebody, meaning intelligence, must have been, quote unquote, shopping around information about me, perhaps even just my name, in the weeks before I was doxxed. If that was the case, Catherine Long probably already knew who I was when she emailed the farm shop. She was trying to get a confirmation, a non intelligent source, for a parallel construction. So essentially, the organization that doxed him did through by asking stores that he regularly shopped at, which implies that they probably already knew who he was. And they needed a way to show that they knew who he was that wasn't a very obvious intelligence informant. I looked
Well,
a little.
or I should say, information obtained through illegal matters. So, it, Rag Nationalist
But
points out that
this wouldn't be illegal, obviously, in his case. But we found proof that it is illegal, and that's what we'll get into later in this. That's the new evidence we found. Is that they are using mechanisms that are only not illegal if they are working directly as spies for the British government.
mm.
So either somebody at Hope Not Hate's getting arrested, or they work directly for the British government.
And given that I think Hope Not Hate is not idiotic, I mean, they seem to be pretty organized, pretty careful, and it would be insane for them to send incriminating information to us, people that they knew would be canceled by them and might have a bone to pick with them. It just seems implausible to me that you would
Yeah.
do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I looked a little deeper into Catherine Long, by which I mean I went on her LinkedIn profile. Ivy League grad, check. 7 months internship in the State Department, check. USAID posting in Tajikistan, check. A specialist in Central Asian languages, fluent in Farsi and Tajik, check. Oh yeah, she's obviously a spy. Sorry, for people who don't know, spies heavily recruited to people fluent in those languages for intercepting terrorist networks and communications. So that's all the things you would have been looking for in spy recruitment. I got no further with her than that, but it was enough to convince me that she is, at the very least, a suitable candidate for an intelligence contact in media. Put another way, she glows. My friends agree. It's been known for decades that Western intelligence services, including the CIA, have intimate links to newspapers, magazines, and the media, planting stories and guiding public opinion, and this continues to present day despite high-profile disavowals like the Church Commission report published in 1976. So for people who don't know, we do now know that there was a period in American history, recent American history, where a lot of quote unquote conspiracy theorists said there's CIA funded individuals at every major newspaper. And now we know that during that period that was true. The CIA had a program where they would fund people working at major newspapers to put out their particular narrative,
Okay.
which at the time was a fascist right-leaning narrative, and now it's a fascist left-leaning narrative. Because, well, the leftists have, back then, like the, I guess you could say like broader Judeo-Christian moral systems, which is what the right was at that time,
Mhm.
had more dominance within mainstream society, so they aligned with that. And right now the urban monoculture, which is the leftist, has more dominance in modern society. And so they align with fascistly imposing that and, well, literally jailing anyone who disagrees with it and gains too many followers.
It's scary.
Then there's Hope Not Hate. Again, a little digging goes a long way. The group is ostensibly a charity and therefore a non-governmental organization, but its links to the British government are no secret. Hope Not Hate receives significant amounts of money from the public purse. From 2019 to 2020, for example, the Hope Not Hate Charitable Trust received $141,000 of British taxpayer money. The Home Office's counter-extremism unit has paid tens of thousands of pounds to Hope Not Hate in recent years, and in return, the Home Office and other government departments have received detailed briefings on quote-unquote extremism, particularly in the digital sphere. In the trustees report for 2019, it states in that year, Hope Not Hate, quote, briefed multiple departments in the Home Office on emerging trends in UK hate, as well as briefing the Home Affairs Committee, and presented a keynote at a Home Office conference on online hate in Derby.
Okay,
And
this explains a lot to me, because when I looked at their Wikipedia page, it clearly states that they don't receive donations from the government because they are a a nonprofit organization, and they can't do that. But if they're making program revenue from the government, that's different. So I guess that's how this works.
Yes, and I would like one of our followers to edit their Wikipedia page to make this clear, to say they don't get money from government, but it's in their own tax filings that they
Well,
do.
they're not receiving donations, but they are getting paid for their services by
A
the
lot.
the
They're getting
UK
paid a
government.
lot, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
put, like, receipts on the screen here right now so you can see just how much money is going to them for these sorts of activities and who is paying it, which is the Anti-Extremism Office, and a
Mm.
great report on this was done by Charlotte Gill, and I'll put her tweet on this here, but what's really horrifying about this is that this was done like money was being funneled to Hope Not Hate by the counter extremism organization in the UK in the same year that, and I will quote her tweet here, Karaya Sadal is a Libyan asylum seeker who served a 17-month sentence for Afarian assault, reduced on appeal for beating an emergency worker, was reported to prevent 4 times, told prison staff he was part of the Islamic State and wanted to quote unquote blow up Britain, was the subject of, quote, dozens of intelligence reports, which showed a pattern of fighting, threats to staff, self harming, and suspected drug use, along with references to extremism, end quote. But the authorities didn't report him because Libya was deemed, quote unquote, unsafe. So 3 men were murdered instead 2 weeks after his release from prison. The extremism office did nothing about this. And when we talk about the urban monoculture, who were these 3 men? They were 3 gay men. Do you know what Stonewall had to say about this? Just so you understand, if you're like, well, I'm gay, so I need the urban monoculture to protect me, they don't give a about you. The only people who will still protect you are the conservatives. And that is it. And that is why gay men are en masse. As we've said by various polls, it's either 45% or 33% of gay men in the US voted for Trump in the last election cycle. More will this election cycle. It's going to be a solidly red voting bloc in the near future.
Wow.
Very obvious because this is what the left will do. Organizations like Stonewall said, our thoughts are with those affected by the attack in Reading on Saturday. It's heartbreaking to hear 2 of the victims were LGBT, but we can't let Islamophobic, racist, and xenophobic rhetoric be used to divide us. We must stand together to make progress. Meanwhile, one man, gay man, responded here, while charities such as Stonewall told us we must not be quote unquote Islamophobic while their bodies are still warm. It's all too incredibly awkward if a Muslim murders 3 gay men, Let's move along now. Nothing to see. Stonewall couldn't even say gay men. They had to say LGBT.
Oh Lord.
It is horrifying how much they are being thrown under the bus.
That
So
is some major flinging there.
now,
That's
now, now, remember, they're supposed to be reducing extremism in the
yeah.
UK. They are
Mm.
briefing UK organizations on who the extremist groups are. Probably briefing them that we're an extremist group now, right? You want to know
Those pronatalists.
you want to know what their founders will do and people who work with them? So a researcher at Hope Not Hate, an anti-extremist left-wing pressure group, has been accused of pushing far-left extremism after a video emerged of him endorsing the communist Red Army. But
Oh
Matthew
dear.
Collins, the head of the intelligence group, so this is the head of the intelligence group for them, stood behind a Soviet flag at an event in London in 2013 and said, quote, comrades, brothers, and sisters, hopenotHate.co.uk. You are our Red Army, end
Oh,
quote.
well.
Janusz Kowalec, a member of the Polish parliament and former government minister, told GB News, quote, praising the Red Army is the most left-wing extremist thing to do, especially after knowing what tortures they did to the peoples of the Siberian gulags, to Poles in Kayat, killing 22,000 of Polish officers, and during the Stalinist anti-Semitic purges, end quote. And all of this is obviously true. And here I note, talk about them being commies, them making fun of us for being pronatalists and saying, look at how fascist this is. The Nazis were pronatalists, when not mentioning that the Soviets, the Red Army, was more pronatalist than the Nazis ever were. Right? But they're just straight up. And we denounce both of these groups, the Nazis, the Soviets, both equally evil, both massively anti-Semitic, both killed millions of people, millions of innocent people, and people who identify with either of these organizations, whether they be modern neo-Nazis or modern communists, should be viewed in the same light as supporting true evil and as active activists against the democratic free countries of the world like the UK or the United States. So they are literally being coached by an extremist organization.
Good Lord.
Didn't fire this guy, by the way.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Okay.
I mean, the one
So
thing, I have one positive note about them so far, which is that they follow our philosophy with nonprofits, which is that you should be making the majority of your money over time, and in fact, most of your income from the work you do. And they're making money from selling to the US government, not donations. And I
to the
appreciate
UK government, Simone, it is functionally a donation. It's just done in a way that makes it legal. They're
Ugh.
basically just stealing from taxpayers. Like and it gets worse. Hold on. It gets worse. Okay.
How can this get worse?
So we haven't even gotten to the spy stuff yet or anything like that. But research from Taxpayers Alliance has revealed that organizations that lobby for changes in public policies within the UK have received around $50,000 in public money since 2018, including 19 million during the COVID pandemic. Oh, no, wait, not 49. Sorry. I said 50,000. What I meant was 50 million. 50
Wait,
million in public, 50 million pounds, by the way, 19 million during the COVID pandemic, and nearly 7.7 million was given to organizations actively fighting against the government scheme to resettle migrants in Rwanda. So the government, the conservative government, was trying to do something to help the people of Britain and the immigrants who had come to their country, fleeing dangerous countries, get them back to safe countries like this guy from Libya. And they were like, oh, it's too dangerous to send them back there. So they're like, we'll send them to Rwanda. No. Taxpayer money was being used to fight this in the public mind, including organizations that were doing this, that were getting government money: Migrant Help, Stonewall, Refugee Action, Hope Not Hate, and Instalaw. Instalaw recently issued judicial review proceedings challenging the legality of the immigration deal, while the other organizations signed an open letter criticizing it. The Department of Health and Social Care gave the most of any white wall department, over $30 million, to 5 organizations, with the Department for Digital, Culture, Media, and Sport gave to influential campaign groups, including Age UK, Gender Intelligence, Migrants Organize, and Stonewall. And these are groups that just support progressive politicians running for office. That's one of the key things they do. And here's an article I'm going to put on screen here. A new Labour MP is also the director of Hope Not Hate. So literally the people in office are deciding where this money is going. An organization that regularly campaigns against conservative elected candidates and is partially funded by the taxpayer and literally doesn't serve its message. Like, the first time they go after one of these anti-Semites on the left, I will rescind all of this. But let's see them, even for a second, infiltrate. They don't even need to infiltrate these lefty groups because they're in them. They're going to their parties. They know they're all rabid anti-Semites, as anyone who has gone to any of their events knows. Hold on, it continues to get worse. So, since Gyardo revealed Hope Not Hate's close labor links, including campaigning specifically against Susan Hall during the mayoral election, it has embedded itself further into the government. 2 of the 6 trustees of its charitable foundation have now made their way into Parliament as Labour MPs. 2 of their trustees made their way into Parliament, but it doesn't end there. Government Whip Ann Tooley is both a director and member of its board of trustees, covering all bases. Labour MP Sarah Owen is a vice chairman of the group's parliamentary group.
Oh, wow.
Made up of only Labour MPs, by the way, no conservatives on this. Another of the campaign organization's directors also happens to be a prominent Labour MP and TUC communications director, Antonia Brantz. Chairman of the trustee of the board is newly elected Labour MP Gurdon Singer-Joson. And this is, by the way, I'm reading from order.order/order.com. More here. The new Hope Not Hate lead organizer admits that he is also a Labour campaigner and is pushing to get a, quote, good solid majority, end quote, for Labour candidate Paul Waugh in Rodenshire via the Hope Not Hate campaign. The organizer says that the group is targeting anyone likely to vote against George Galloway to convince him to vote for anyone else. We're just trying to get anyone who's not likely to vote for Galloway. The charity, which received taxpayer funds, previously getting cash from taxpayer-supported Paul Himmelin Foundation, PHF, and City Hall, has deep, wide links to the Labour Party. And then here, Hope Not Hate's ground campaign also goes into some detail about the MRP polling, which they bought for the constituency, which allows them to accurately target voters who can mobilize. They say it's, quote, not very cheap, end quote, the last time Guaido checked. MRP constituency polling cost around £20,000. Even if they got a discount, it's unlikely they drag the cost below the £700 spending limit, in which case Hope Not Hate would be falling foul of clear electoral commission rules. So they're just blatantly breaking the law. This has been found out, this has been made public, and no one is doing anything about this, or nothing has gone through. This would make sense if they are actually partially an arm of the British intelligence agency, which we'll get to more evidence that this is the case in just a second. And I should say an ideologically captured arm attempting to bring down the British state. They are, well, not really bring it down, but support the oligarchical network that is antithetical to British and American democracy. They are very much what the Kingsmen are. In that, in every Kingsman episode movie, I always say, you know, they're always fighting against somebody who has some like radical idea about how the world might be improved to try to maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
The status quo, good. I, for example, actually agree with one of the villains of the second one, the President of the United States.
Wait, what was the President of the United States doing in the second one?
So there was
The
a
second one was
drug
about
that would
pot,
kill
right?
anyone who took it.
Right.
Eventually. And he wanted to just let them die so that he could finally end the drug problem in the United States. And
It happened.
I love the way that they signaled that he was actually evil, because at first it was like only drug addicts are dying from this. And then you learned, oh no, one of his staffers was also a cocaine addict because she wanted to keep up with her workload. And when a white middle class woman is on the list, you know that it could affect you. Urban monoculture. So you're not supposed
But there
to
was
see him
even
as
a
bad guy.
princess on the list. Remember his girlfriend? So God forbid.
Yeah, but his girlfriend was a junkie. Like, I think if society had that, like everybody who did drugs just like died one day, going forwards, more lives would be saved and more general suffering would be saved.
I think you don't realize how pervasive drug use is.
Well, no, we as a society, and keep in mind, it didn't affect people who were taking like nootropics or like other drugs meant to like control their daily behavior. This was like people on cocaine or other types of recreational drugs.
Yeah, it was just one specific drug that that woman's company was marketing and distributing. So it was just one drug, like a party drug, I think.
Yeah, like a party drug. It was not a drug that anyone really had a good excuse to be using for productivity improvement or anything like that. And but what I mean is you wouldn't just have a disruption of the existing global drug supply network. You would also have nobody doing drugs in the future, because everyone would have, like, bigger than COVID, would have grown up through this period where it's like, oh, this is why we actually have to take drugs super seriously. And I think if you go to our video on the drug crisis that we're going through right now, I can't even name it because it got the video demonetized, but you will learn just how bad things are and just the level of suffering, that something big needs to be done about this. All right, so to continue, now we're going to go into the actual spy stuff.
Ooh.
The links appear to go far beyond government funding for dull PowerPoint presentations at dull conferences. Jason Genza Giorgigi has alleged Hope Not Hate is a direct front for British intelligence. At home and abroad, i.e. for M15 and M16 in 2017, Giorgigi was caught in an undercover sting in a New York bar by a Swedish Antifa activist working for Hope Not Hate. Giorgigi lost his teaching job at the New Jersey Institute of Technology and subsequently sued the university. He maintains that the sting was on behalf of British intelligence after he left the alt-right corporation in the immediate fallout of Charlottesville. This is where things start to get murky and a bit confusing. You can listen to Giorgigi explain his allegations at links in this video, and I guess I'll put a picture of it on screen so you can Google it. But there's other evidence that points in the same direction. First of all, Hope Not Hate is an offshoot of Searchlight, and a quote-unquote anti-fascist organization. I love, you should watch our Antifa video. All these organizations are just very clearly fascist organizations now. Antifa literally calls its like people who go disrupt protests black shirts, which is also what the original fascist Mussolini called their people who went and disrupted protests. Their goals are exactly the same as fascists. Watch our, because people, when they're like, modern Democrats aren't fascists, they're kind of different. Watch our Modern Democrats Are Fascist video. Seriously, seriously, seriously watch it if you haven't watched it yet. They are not like fascists. They are literally a mirror of fascist ideology at the height of fascism. It has just been occluded to you what that ideology actually was, and they've changed which race is at the top. That's it. Which race is at the bottom is still the same, I'll tell you that much. The Jews are not friends to these groups. Let's continue here. So, from the left wing of its ties to the government and intelligence services, including British and French intelligence. But here also, they say they had some Mossad intelligence working with Searchlight. So, this is one place where the Jews accidentally helped these people before realizing that they were going to turn against them and start calling for their extinction, as we see people regularly marching through the streets of London do today. We've seen this, right? You and I have seen this. Actually doing the what is it, River to the Sea chant in the streets of London. So, whew, that was a mistake.
That was weird.
Ruth Sees, former Labour MP and now a life peer in the House of Lords, served as deputy director of Hope Not Hate from 2011 to 2015. WikiLeaks revealed in 2009, while still a prospective parliamentary candidate, she was described in a confidential American cable as, which was strictly protected, by the way, as, quote, code for a protected intelligent asset.
Okay, so they're dealing with communications associated with Hope Not Hate in a way that they would deal with intelligence conversations.
Well, people who are running the organization as coded as intelligent assets.
Okay.
So, I mean, obviously, she was an intelligence asset. That seems pretty clear to me. You wouldn't use that code otherwise. Strictly protect means that the individual is an intelligence asset and running this organization. What's funny about this possibility, Hope Not Hate as a direct organ of the British government, is that the group is full of people who are committed to the violent overthrow of capitalism and would therefore count as quote unquote extremists by Hope Not Hate's own definition and that of the British intelligence services and government. In
Details.
Hope Not Hate's own quote head of intelligence in quote Matthew Collins was caught on film, and this is the thing about the Red Army that I mentioned earlier. In the most recent State of Hate report, it targeted Jacob Rees-Mogg, John Redwood, Ian Duncan Smith, Danny Kruger, and Miriam Crates, all conservative MPs, and suggested that they were quote-unquote radicalizing the conservative government through their quote-unquote opposition to woke politics, end quote. And
okay, wow, that feels extra egregious. I mean, I know you've just listed off a ton of egregious things, but the fact that there are Labour MPs directly associated with this organization, but that this organization is in turn attacking the reputation of conservative MPs, and they're receiving money from the government. This is just like,
for being in opposition to wokeism, but it gets worse than that. The other thing they attacked them for was, quote, a certain conception of free speech, end quote.
nah, wait.
Basically, they're saying they don't like that they're promoting free speech. They also promote quote unquote free speech, i.e. anything. And if you've seen the wacky cases, and I'll add some in post here, of people being arrested for like saying completely inoffensive things in the UK.
The UK is scary. I would be terrified to be on social media in the UK.
We should be able to set the rules in the UK. And you see mainstream, even progressives fighting against this with like, you know, what's her name? J.K. Rowling fighting against that insane law that came out in Scotland that wanted to jail people for misgendering people. That is absolutely wild that they feel that they have this level of cultural hegemony. And this is what they mean when they say a certain conception. So that's what they think makes them a hate group. Conservative MPs. Necessity makes for straying bedfellows. A group infested with radical Marxists can just assuredly, wittingly or unwittingly, carry out the bidding of the British government, or any government for that matter. The Black Panthers did a fine job of playing useful idiots for the FBI and CIA in the 1960s and the 1970s as part of Operation Chaos and COINTPRO. But it's also possible for the goals of each group to be in direct alignment with those official agencies. Left-wingers want to make life hard for quote-unquote fascists and quote-unquote right-wing extremists, and so do Western governments. So why wouldn't they work together? And all it would take is a little tip-off now and then. Now, here's what I want to point out here. I don't even think that that's what's happening here. I think that this is even more conspiratorial. I think that individuals who are in the deep state, who are like, you know, state bureaucrats, have these ideologies. Like, obviously they do. They go to the same parties that these other people go to, and they funnel cash their way. I mean, obviously they're MPs on both sides, right? Like they're literally the same group. This is literally the same social group. It has just ideologically captured the British intelligence agencies.
Wow.
And if people don't believe that intelligence agencies can be captured by wokeism, I'm going to put some like US Army and CIA recruitment stuff in here right now so you can see how bad it's gotten even in our own country.
When I was 17, I quoted Zora Neale Hurston's How It Feels to Be Colored Me in my college application essay. The line that spoke to me stated simply, I am not tragically colored. There is no sorrow dammed up in my soul nor lurking behind my eyes. I do not mind at all. At 17, I had no idea what life would bring, but Zora's sentiment articulated so beautifully how I felt as a daughter of immigrants then and now. Nothing about me was or is tragic. I am perfectly made. I can wax eloquent on complex legal issues in English while also belting Guayaquil de mis amores in Spanish. I can change a diaper with one hand and console a crying toddler with the other. I am a woman of color. I am a mom. I am a cisgender millennial who's been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I am intersectional, but my existence is not a box-checking exercise. I am a walking declaration, a woman whose inflection does not rise at the end of her sentences, suggesting that a question has been asked. I did not sneak into CIA. My employment was not and is not the result of a fluke or slip through the cracks. I used to struggle with imposter syndrome, but at 36, I refuse to internalize misguided patriarchal ideas of what a woman can or should be. I am tired of feeling like I'm supposed to apologize for the space I occupy rather than intoxicate people with my effort, my brilliance. I am proud of me, full stop.
We, interestingly, like the hippies before, are fighting for freedom against a fascist force that's attempting to push a cultural hegemony and keep wars going, you know, in it's just horrifying. It's
You
horrifying.
did not just call us tippy. You did not.
Well, hey, I just say that we are aligned with the fight that they had previously, and I think that we've seen this. Actually, it was interesting when I was reading the piece about why the guy who ended up doing all of the undercover stuff got into this. He was like, he was surprised that some of his older, like hippie, crunchy friends were now beginning to align with the conservatives against the vaccine. And he's like, how does this happen? How are they radicalizing these people? It's like, they're not radicalizing. They just realized the teams have switched. And now you guys are the ones who control the government. And
Well, and I think that's the interesting thing is that people on the inside of this don't realize, the fascists don't realize that they themselves have been radicalized, which is interesting. I think there's this lack of understanding of what's going on, even from within the house. But what is uniquely scary about this is that I guess you and I are coming online to the fact that this is happening. But apparently this is happening. This has been happening for quite some time. And there's public knowledge of it and nothing is being done. And how much worse are things going to get? I mean, how much more? I mean, we always get coverage of, oh, sorry. Right. I can't. Oh, I
Sorry,
forgot.
there's a whole conversation here that I just had to delete because YouTube will immediately restrict the video if we have that conversation. So we're not going to have that conversation. But I will.
And that's also crazy. Wow, we live in a thought crime world now where we can't say certain things. That is.
Simone, I'm just going to continue reading. And you can
Please.
sit there and see that you can't have the conversation you want to have.
Thanks.
So, parallel construction, one way or another, was almost certainly a part in the doxing of Jonas Kieperman, aka Lomez. Oh, we met him, right? Although The Guardian made no mention of it, Jonathan was aware months before his identity was revealed that a prominent conservative figure with, how shall we say, a penchant for intrigue, was making a great show of asking his friends for him by name. The implication was that this renowned schemer would soon release Jonathan's name as part of one of his trademark I am a concerned centrist articles that he writes for his online magazine. And he wanted Jonathan to know this and be afraid. The grave men, parenthetically, was an article Jonathan wrote as Lomez for the Catholic journal First Things, just as Bill Kristol was outraged that the Claremont Institute had stooped to publish an anonymous raw egg eating eccentrist 30 times and counting, Bill. So our concerned centrists simply couldn't believe that a renowned theology journal would publish an anonymously pinned article. And not just that, an anonymously pinned article about a concept, the Longhouse, taken from Bronze Age Pervert's scandalous book, Bronze Age mindset. This fervent pants wetter was only dissuaded when an editor at First Things guaranteed that Jonathan would have a right of reply, and so it appears he decided to pass on Jonathan's details to someone who could do the dirty work for him instead, Jason Wilson. I don't know what all that is about. That is clearly inside baseball. But I will say that it is interesting here that, like, Bronze Age pervert is not that far right. I know people like paint him as far right because he goes against the urban monoculture, but his actual beliefs seem fairly centrist to me, just sort of unique, just sort of against the grain, which is pretty wild that they would be attacked for that. I'd also note here, and this is something we'll do a separate episode on, but if you are conservative and you're thinking about entering the public sphere, do not do so anonymously. Do not do so anonymously. It is so stupid.
I can try rewording that in a more diplomatic way. What we would say is, if you consider becoming a non-leftist speaker, don't do it through anonymous accounts. Don't try to hide it, because as much as we respect a lot of people who did that and we think their takes are fun, honestly, a lot of people whose takes are a lot more reasonable than even ours have been through severe cancellation events because of the fact that they've tried to hide their identities. It is nearly impossible to hide your identity, especially now, especially in the age of AI. And through illicit, legal, or illegal means, I don't care, you will be found. And the mere fact that you are attempting to hide your identity makes you vulnerable and makes you more of a target. Expect that everything will come out. Expect that everything will come back to you in your real identity, and don't try to fight it. It's going.
I can think of a great example here
Okay.
of two specific individuals, one who is always public and one who tried to be private. So we're reading this by Raw Nationalist, so I'll use his as an example.
Mhm.
Think about the backlash and the real life consequences Raw Nationalist got when he was doxxed compared with any consequences Ed Dutton has ever faced. Ed Dutton is miles to the right of Raw Nationalist in terms of anything he's ever written. And yet he has experienced significantly less backlash because he never had a doxed moment.
Hmm.
And this is why it's so dangerous. But it also helps make sure, like individuals like us, that you know you're always being recorded.
Mhm.
Okay? Never say anything you don't want played to your real life boss.
Mm.
All right. So to keep going here. As the association between Bellingcat and Western intelligence agencies deepened, the group has moved away from its earlier model of, quote, open source, end quote, intelligence, where it only used publicly accessible data, to a model that acknowledges, and I'm putting on screen here that proves this, a piece that proves this, the use of the kinds of restricted data like flight manifests and cell phone records that only intelligence agencies, hackers, and criminals have access to. Bellingcat assiduously denied that they work with the government, but they would say that, wouldn't they? Also, the labor baroness on their board is a U.S. intelligence asset, according to her Wikipedia. She was named, yeah, and that's the one that we talked about earlier. So she's also on, I guess, Bellingcat. Okay, so just so you understand how bad Hope Not Hate is, Hope Not Hate inflamed the riots by spreading false reports of a Muslim woman being attacked with acid. An MP from their own party, from the Labour Party, amplified this, with Josh Fenton Glenn, MP, retweeting far-right cowards attacking women. When people show you who they are, believe them. And this is retweeting a Hope Not Hate tweet. Reports are coming in of acid being thrown at a car window at a Muslim woman in Middlesbrough. Absolutely horrendous. This is completely, they just made something up to inflame the riots because that's what they try to do. They are not they are literally an extremist group. And they should be treated and labeled as an extremist group. And in fact, I will go so far that if I find my way into a Trump administration, I will have Hope Not Hate labeled by the State Department as a terrorist extremist group, alongside all the neo-Nazi groups, because they're acting like one. And they need to be categorized as one. And I think if we get a conservative majority in the UK needs to do this as well, so we can begin to ferret out who their collaborators are within our intelligence network.
Yeah, I think that's fair, especially with government funds being used to so flagrantly fund a political agenda that is not shared by all taxpayers. That seems so
Well, it's not just
blatantly
not
okay.
shared by all taxpayers. It's like clearly not a threat to the country. They're like half of the country is a threat to the country. That's like what they're getting at. They
Yeah.
believe that is the most anti-democratic thing I could conceivably imagine. They are trying to ensure that only one of the two major political factions within their country can win and are using, it seems, both intelligence assets and taxpayer dollars to ensure that happens. That is not democracy. That is fascism. That is anti-democratic. That is secret police stuff.
Yeah,
Okay?
it is crazy to me that that is real. I just I can't believe it's real, and I think it took us getting involved in something like this for us to actually fully come to terms with the fact that it's real.
Mhm.
It seems that ridiculous.
Now, here is where we break the case because we collected a certain item when we were working with the guy. Apparently, we were much more careful than anyone who had ever worked with him before.
And I want to point out how meaningful that is because you've alluded to this in other podcasts, but what people consider or call the far right is one of the most open, transparent, inclusive, kind groups of people that you will ever encounter. That I've never received a cold shoulder from these people. The only cold shoulders I've ever really received are from progressive groups, which is, I
Oh,
think,
absolutely.
notable.
And it's funny. I what if like this is just like a classic interview you see where a
Mhm.
progressive interviewer will go up to like a black person or like a flamboyantly gay person at like a right wing rally and be like, "Why are you here? You must be treated horribly by this group." And they're like, "No, actually, they've been nicer to me than the leftists ever were." And then the reporter's like, "See how brainwashed they are."
So
Um,
it comes as no surprise to me that this Chris Morton, who is this is the identity that the undercover reporter presented to the far right extremists that he interacted with, that he was met with basically no criticism, no one really pushing on his background, no one really questioning him. And it is also notable that we even pushed him as much as we did, but I will I will say this, he did some things that were pretty flagrantly suspicious. I mean, aside from having no online footprint at all.
And his resume was like he gave us a resume to try to prove who he was. It was like
Mhm.
a paper thin, obviously fake resume if you went over it. I just didn't check it.
Yeah, why don't you should put it on the screen. Put it on the screen. But also his email was literally the real Chris Morton at insertdomain.com, like comment
Yeah.
that insert email provider.com. The real Chris Morton, as in like the totally not faked personality. So at one point, this was after, no, mind you, after we'd have multiple Zoom calls with him, after we had met with him in person over a private lunch, and after we had invited him and looped him in to a private dinner with
That
other
we paid
friends,
for, by the way, which
which
is
we paid for.
hugely against like the legality in terms of like what reporters are
That is true.
with
Um,
a nonprofit, by the way.
with the
That is
nonprofit.
wild.
Yeah.
He's stealing nonprofit money from right-wing organizations.
Anyway, so even after that, we already looped him in. So we're also very inclusive, and we honestly don't really care if someone, and we're just as inclusive to adversarial journalists, I should say. We wouldn't have invited an adversarial journalist knowingly to a private dinner party with other people present because we don't want to put anyone else at risk. But we personally will never
Guardian just
not
reached
meet.
out doing another piece on us, and you're like, and they've always done hit pieces on us, and you're like, yeah, sure, come over.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, come on. Yeah, the Guardian, who covered Hope Not Hate's most recent exposés that they just put out, is coming over to our place on Friday. I'm going to hang out
We
with another journalist.
never close ourselves off to anyone, but I want to get to the evidence here,
Right.
Simone.
So anyway, after this, but before making additional intros for him, because again, we, like the rest of the far right community, are very inclusive and open. We're like, hey, we just want to make sure you're a real person because you really do kind of have a suspicious background, the real Chris Morton at emailprovider.com. So we asked, and he, unprovoked, sent us a picture of a passport.
And this is when we decided he was safe. Do you know
Yeah,
why we decided he was safe when he sent us a picture of a
because
passport?
it is illegal.
No, no, no,
For
Simone. I will read Perplexity's answer to this. Okay.
okay, yeah.
Creating and showing a fake passport to anyone in the UK is illegal and can result in serious consequences. It is illegal to create, process, or use a fake passport in the UK under the Identity Documents Act of 2010. This law makes it an offense to possess a false identity document with improper intention, which would include creating and showing a fake passport to someone, even if they are just a random civilian.
Well, but
Potential
also just like
consequences.
literally, I'm quoting the Identity Documents Act of 2010. Quote, it is an offense for a person without reasonable excuse to have in person's possession or under person's control an identity document that is false. So it wasn't just the fact that he showed it to us, or it wasn't the fact that he showed it to us to mislead us. It was the fact that he possesses a fake ID. His name is not Chris Morton. His name is, oh, what is his name?
Simone, we'll get to that in a second. We'll get to
Okay.
that in a second because we're going to go over a big piece about him. But the prison sentence for this would be a 10-year prison sentence.
Oh.
And you would have a criminal record after doing this, and you would also face fines.
So
This
we
is a
know
very
this can't be his illegal use, because if you aren't illegally doing this, if the government didn't provide this to him somehow in a way that made him feel safe, he wouldn't send to people he's about to cancel a piece of incriminating evidence that could put him in jail.
for 10 years.
Yes, because he knew he was going to post something about us, and he knew that we would have this in our email inboxes just sitting there.
I mean, even with all of this, and I would note to anybody who's listening to this, if you are in the UK and you want to test to this and prove Hope Not Hate's connection to British intelligence, just press the case. I mean, we're putting a picture of the email here. We're putting a picture of the passport here. I'll leave it to you guys. But I'm fairly certain that what the case isn't going to go anywhere because it's going to turn out that they're connected to British intelligence. And I would not be airing this if I was not certain of that.
Yeah, because we don't want to put anyone in jail. We do not want to put anyone
I
in
don't
jail.
want to put anyone in jail for just like he got
Look,
brainwashed.
we're
by
penal
a
colony
cult.
people. We believe in public whip. Like, I would much rather be publicly whipped than put in jail, for sure. Personally.
Yeah, no,
like, we're
I'm
very
just saying,
against
look,
jail. So,
he's
like,
just
I
a
don't want
random
anyone going to
guy,
jail.
Went to Cambridge, got brainwashed by the cult. You know, it's normal. It happens to people. One day he may wake up, you know, and be like, oh my God, I can't believe all the horrifying things I've done, all the people I've been collaborating with, these horrific people who divide humans based on their ethnic group, want to enforce a government ideology on the populace and put Jews at the bottom. They look a lot like another group that rose to power before, and I was one of their witless collaborators. They enforced their power on the streets using black shirts, just like the fascists did historically. I'm just saying.
Hey,
I'm
it
just
happened to me.
saying.
I was
There
definitely
is
on
the
this
moment where you
progressive
wake up and
side.
you go, I was a Nazi. Oh my God. But he's not going to have that moment probably. But he could, you know, I
He
don't want to
could.
go to jail.
No, I think he hasn't been working with Hope Not Hate until very recently. This was his
Yeah,
first
I don't
real
think he
project.
understood like what the agenda is here or anything like that. I just think he
Yeah.
had this like idea of I'm going to go undercover. Wouldn't this be interesting to understand this stuff better?
Yeah.
Write a book on it.
Yeah.
And he got funding from them. And
Yeah.
I don't think he understands the full agenda at play here
Mhm.
or the truly nefarious intent of a lot of these organizations in terms of stamping out any sort of diversity in either the UK or the US. Oh yeah, token diversity, like let's say like color tone diversity, but not real diversity, not like diversity of ideas or beliefs or anything like that. I mean, look at how fast they dropped their commitment to fighting anti-Semitism as soon as it took over their own party.
Look at it from his perspective. He was a journalist. He covered things like the rise of the far right a little bit, but he wrote about plenty of other things.
Yeah.
He is looking for good journalistic opportunities. He knew that Hope Not Hate had experience working undercover, and he planned on going to some, far right extremist conference undercover or something like that. And he saw the opportunity and he jumped at it. And I think he's an intelligent person who's doing the best for his career.
profile that looks similar to somebody who would have worked in intelligence. And there is evidence that somebody else sent us that his parents are in intelligence, British intelligence.
Former intelligence.
Since recording this, they found fairly definitive proof that his grandfather was a spy working for the British government. Specifically, the thing that made the connection, rather than just a last name, so we weren't sure before, was they found business records for a brick and mortar development limited company.
Yeah, maybe.
However, I will not provide that evidence because that could be seen as doxing of his parents, which to me is super gross. The only reason I'm even mentioning his name is he has publicly published with his name that he was the one who did this.
Mhm.
If he hadn't done that, I would never release his real name. because unlike him, I don't believe in this kind of doxing. I think it's wrong. I think it's evil. And I think it's that what organizations do when they want to scare people. I mean, I think you look at something like Raw Egg Nationalist, revealing who he is doesn't like hurt the brand of Raw Egg Nationalist. He's like a
No.
normal, healthy looking, successful guy.
Yeah.
You know, all it does is make people like him afraid to speak their mind against the fascists who are taking over our government.
Mhm.
That's what it does. So let's continue here. During the spring of 2023, and this is written by him, right, or by somebody writing about him, which I thought was very
This is written by a former colleague of him at The Mill, which is the publication where he worked, even part-time, leading into his undercover experience with Hope Not Hate.
Yes. During the spring of 2023, undercover reporter Harry Schuckman sat amongst a group of far-right campaigners in a fortified back patio belonging to Paul Golding, a Salford-based leader of Britain First, and he was terrified. Schuckman had spent the day pamphleting for the party under a secret identity. His fellow pamphleteers knew him as Chris, while he wore a hidden camera. As the group sat around the high-walled barbed wire patio of Golding's second home in Dartford, eating takeaway pizza as twilight fell, Golding was staring directly at Schuckman's chest. This was a man who had been previously jailed for aggravated harassment. I have never heard anything so dystopian as aggravated harassment. They act like it's aggravated assault.
What if he chides me? What if he chides me?
In quote.
I'm just picturing him in this backyard patio,
hold on. We have to read
eating
what he's
Pizza
thinking.
Express, which is so delicious.
Yeah.
Just like so scared out of his mind that someone is going to, in an aggravated fashion, chide him for like trying to dox him.
Quote, I felt so uncomfortable. It was like my heart was about to explode, end quote, Schuckman recalls. Golding was looking, quote, dead at my chest, drilling his eyes in, and I felt myself getting very hot. Like, fuck, has he seen it, end quote? Immediately, Schuckman began plotting his getaway, though he quickly realized with mounting horror that he was several doors away from the exit. There was, quote, no way I could escape, end quote, without a very thorough tongue lashing from this man. You naughty, naughty man. How dare you betray all of your friends' trust and our kindness?
We got you pizza. They gave him pizza.
That's the most like British thing possible. And then to my horror, I realized I may be criticized. I may have to face some social consequences for my actions.
How embarrassing. Oh dear.
Oh my. But I just love it. No, but it's because he has, and you should watch our Antifa video if you don't do this, but the leftists use this social technology where they equate somebody being like, too many immigrants are coming to our country when more people have moved in, more immigrants this year came into America than there were Americans born in America. And Elon Musk was like, this is a problem. And I'm like, yeah, that does actually seem like a problem. And people like him would be like, that's a fascist thing to say. And it's like they do that so that they can, in their mind, connect you with Nazis to dehumanize you without actually showing any ideological similarity to Nazis. Whereas along every major political and ideological axis, except whites being at the top, they are exactly Nazis politically. And again, go see our video, Is the Left Actually Fascist?
I don't know, man. There's a lot of whites at the top of these organizations.
No, but what I'm saying is that the ideology that Nazis pushed is that humans should be viewed as a striated ethno-group system where some ethnic group
that one particular view is absent from these leftist groups. That one, yeah.
Well, no, I'm saying they have this ideology. They have an ideology of like a past greatness that awards various ethnic groups the right to be treated this way. They have narratives where the reason that ethnic groups that should be high within the system are not high within the system due to oppression of the Jews or other groups. I mean, that's literally what they argue. You can look at
shoot, you're right. It's still the Jews that are
this is what leftists forget is Nazis weren't mad at the Jews because they saw Jews as like lesser than them. They were mad at the Jews because they thought the Jews were hoarding all the money and oppressing them.
Oh, no.
That was why they were mad at the Jews, because the Jews were privileged. It is the same ideology.
Oh.
Anyway, so And I just like they're like hanging out with the good guys. They're like, I don't understand why no one on the good guy side is suspicious of me. I'm not saying that this group, I don't know anything about this Britain First group, but if it's anything like Make America First, it's probably not that bad. Make America First is a mainstream organization in the US that is just concerned about American culture. And I'm like,
Yeah, but
I
let's
get
be
it.
clear though. I don't know what they actually stand for. So
I don't know what any of these groups stand for, but I'm just saying the people I've met in Make America First are generally nice people. And when I talk to them, they're generally less racist than this guy was pretending to be.
Mm.
Less racist than the email Hope Not Hate sent us. One of my favorite things about the Hope Not Hate email,
Oh
it was
my
one of the most
gosh.
racist things. So there was this email when they were going to expose us, and they go, in private, we caught you saying you wanted to help exceptional people have more kids. But on your website, you say that you want to help Latin Americans. How do you square that?
Can you believe they said that?
Now, you've got to keep in mind who we are. We live half time in Latin America. We have a home in Peru. The godson of our firstborn son is
Godfather.
Latin American.
Yeah.
Okay? We are very, very pro Latin American.
Just to
We
be
run a
clear, in case
company-
you're only half listening to this podcast, they insinuated through their questioning of us that
no
there
exceptional
are no
people
elite
existed in Latin
people
America.
in Latin America.
Mhm.
What?
They're like, you
What?
say you want to help people with good genes, but you also want to help Latin Americans, those disgusting rat monsters. It's like, whoa! I have never heard, and I'm being serious here. I have been around great replacement theory people. I have been around America First people. I have never heard one of them speak
Say
that
something so racist.
disparagingly about Latin Americans. Not
Yeah,
one of them.
yeah, fair.
People are like, well, then why do they want to keep them out of the country? Because they want to preserve like a cultural difference. Like Latin Americans are culturally different from us, and I can understand. I don't agree with all that. As I said, like we've never supported like great replacement theory or anything like that. But like, I can understand that a non-malicious person might have concerns there. But anyway,
Yeah,
quote,
just to be clear to the writer from the mill who did say that we supported great replacement theory. No, but we've joked about greater replacement theory, whereby autistic people will inherit the future because they seem to be oddly pronatalist. But that is very different.
that's a joke.
It's a
Making
joke
fun
about
of
autists.
great replacement theory that we tell regularly that you need to be dumb not to get. But you know,
Yeah.
these people, they're in a cult.
I
They're
don't
just
think they
cool.
have very much of a sense of humor. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I've been to lefty events. There's like no jokes. It's like sad and depressing all the time, and everyone's always talking about their mental health issues. It's why like all their comics are bad, all their movies are bad, all their everything is bad. They like have nothing. All independent media that people watch now is like right leaning, whether it's like on YouTube or on podcasts. Like I put a top 10 list of podcasts here. It's like all right leaning stuff. Only the legacy media, only the stuff that could be bureaucratically captured has any leftist supporters anymore. But this is on. He went to like this master teacher who was going to teach him how to be undercover and infiltrate these groups. And he said, quote, you need to have biographical questions at your fingertips, end quote. Schultzman tells me, quote, you can't hesitate. Do you have siblings? What's your dad's name? What did you do for your A-levels? Where did you go to uni? Where did you grow up? Biographical questions need instant answers, end quote. And I'm like, no, you gave us like this paper thin, like child could have written it, child could have told it was fake. Resume, we just don't ask many questions. Most people don't ask many questions in these groups because they know they're trying to make the world a better place.
Well, and I just
they
love that,
assume-
like, despite this prep that they apparently had, this whole spycraft moment, they decided on the email, the real Chris Morton.
I think it's based on the real Donald Trump. I think they were trying to create like a.
Oh, they were trying to like dog whistle some kind of Trump affiliation.
Yeah, look. I'll just say, look, this is the type of person who is so fundamentally racist and bigoted that they think that Latin Americans can't be exceptional people. No,
I know.
bothers me that I am not okay with like actual racists. They like actually squig me out. And like these guys are like, and people are like, what do you mean like actual racist versus if somebody's like, I want to preserve my country's culture and I think it's different from the cultures of recent immigrants. I don't think they're lesser than me. I just want to preserve my country's heritage. I can be like, I might not agree with you, but that is a reasonable and non-racist thing to believe.
No, that's actually, we would say a good thing. And we're going to do a podcast soon where you kind of you and I discuss that, like the factor
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we think that pluralism
But
plays.
but if somebody comes to me and they're like, I think Latin Americans have disgusting doo-doo genes, I'm like, whoa, buddy, chill out, dial it back. That's not fun. Okay, so let's keep going here. Hemerson suggested that Shulkman as Chris present himself. Hemerson is like the secret spy master guy.
He's
Present
the guy
himself.
who sent us the accusations for response before this article went live.
Oh,
Because
he is. Oh,
he
fun.
and he and Chris Morton, whatever his real name is, were the
Oh,
people
so he's
working
the
on this
super
project
racist
together.
guy? Because he's the one who drafted that. I would say Chris didn't say all this racist stuff against Latin Americans. This was this other guy, this Patrick Emerson.
Yeah. And Patrick is the one who sent us the email.
Yeah. As I learned more about, like originally when we responded to the email, we're like, hey, maybe they actually want to fight racism and anti-Semitism and we can work together in some way. Like I was like, because I didn't know anything about their organization. And now I know that they're like raging anti-Semites who are really just a political affiliation trying to stamp out ideological diversity. It should have been clear to me. I mean, given how religiously offensive their attacks on us were, that they were just an attacks on mainstream Calvinist beliefs, and yet they're supposed to fight for religious inclusivity. Yet the concept of the elect, they're like, nope, you need to be canceled for your religion. I'm like, anyway. So that he present himself as someone who's relatively new to the scene and curious what it's all about. Exactly the type of person we would be happy to talk to. Chris has watched some far-right YouTubers who have piqued his interest. Chris is concerned about where the country is going. Quote, there's a perception in this far right that an infiltrator will be the most extreme person in the room, end quote. And he was extreme enough to make me uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah.
I remember after the talk, I was like, that guy is like, he needs to chill out. And so we tried to introduce him to like a bunch of like more chill people at like our dinner parties and stuff like that. Cause he seemed open to being more chill. He seemed like something who may have like watched one too many Ed Dutton videos and like really bought into all of that and didn't realize that there was like another side to all of this where you can admit that falling fertility rates is a thing, admit that humans have genes, admit that dysgenics is a real problem without spiraling into like racist conspiracies. But I think that that's just what he was trained to try to learn, but he came across as like really racist. Anyway, but again, like the type of racist who is open to deconversion, which is why we took the time to talk to him. But that's not to say there weren't many frightening moments. Besides the evening at Golding's back patio, Shulkman was once meeting with somebody connected to the Pronatalist movement when he took a video call under his real name. Normally, he's careful to be logged in only under his Chris account while he's undercover. I'm guessing who...
Let's not... We shouldn't name her.
No, they named her in the article.
I know, but she probably...
Okay, sorry. This may have been our female POC college, like basically intern at the time, who is like the sweetest person, and they insisted on doxing, even though we told them like, what are you doing? She has never really worked for us. She's had no connection to our organization for years. You can provably verify any of this. And yet he's scared of this little Chinese and Persian woman because she's fundamentally a bigot and a coward. That's it, right? He just wants to go out there and so I somebody who could be like terrified, like this college kid who I need to dox is gonna like what kind of a bastard do you just imagine being afraid of this person? Just imagine being afraid of this person. Like what? And this person, by the way, in my general experience, is generically left-leaning.
Yeah.
She just admits humans have genes and they affect behavior. That's it. That was the evil thing. Absolutely heartless. And anyway, but let's go further here. And if you want to understand like what I mean by dehumanizing people and like normal people, you guys watch our podcast. A lot of you see us every day. You know that while they might be calling us far-right activists, you know we are at best center-right activists, where I think a lot of people might consider us centrist or even leftists, right? But they're so brainwashed they can't see this. And they work apparently for the British government. But it was also difficult for Schultman to, quote, befriend people so that you can ultimately betray them, end quote. It's hard to explain, he says. Even those were people who had said and done incredibly racist things. anyone who knows us knows that is just a lie. They were still people who told Schultman about their friends and love lives and their gardens and their holidays in Spain, their divorces, their parents getting old and sick. You have to have a heart of stone to not empathize with them on some level, Schultman says, even though if they knew who you were, end quote, which is just not true. I mean, you can see what we say about him. Like, we don't have any genuine animosity to him. I just see him as somebody who is brainwashed and is basically working for a fascist government to complete their agenda. And one day he may wake up, just like so many Nazi collaborators did, and been like, am I the baddie? Like, is the side with the ethno hierarchy that believes that different ethnic groups are deserving of different levels of human dignity, the side that's taking away people's children, is that maybe the bad guy side, the side that controls all government institutions and large companies and enforces its will on a diverse group of people, and the other side is just fighting for pluralism and the right to have their own cultural practices? Is the side that almost every day holds anti-Semitic marches through the heart of London, might they be the bad guy?
I think what's really interesting too is that a lot of people, including possibly this undercover reporter, are kind of under this like delusional perception that there is some big evil far right community that doesn't really exist. And he's sitting in these undercover scenarios, terrified of being caught, but I think also maybe feeling a lot of cognitive dissonance because he is trying to see something that's not there, maybe subtly realizing that he's effectively attempting to disrupt and dismantle the lives and careers of people who are undeserving of such persecution.
Yes.
We're totally normal people who are concerned about their communities, who haven't actually said anything insane.
I'd also point out, and we pointed this out before, I'll always point it out, it's something that people need to be reminded of because it's one of the biggest lies that the left will tell people, is that 538, Nate Silver, a mainstream US polling organization, showed that there is not more racism, at least not significantly more racism, within Republican voters in the United States than left-wing voters. In fact, until Obama was elected, your average white Democrat was more likely to say they would not vote for a black president than your average white Republican. It is a lie. There is not any disproportionately racist Republican base. Now, by that, what I mean, I'm not saying that there's no racists who support Republican candidates, but there are not more racists who support Republican candidates than the equivalent racist groups on the left. And here I'm talking about not like calling like Black Lives Matter a racist thing. I'm talking about white generic racists.
Yeah, sort of the classic definition of racism as understood by the left. And let's be honest, all people are bastards. I mean, people are messed up.
No, but what I'm saying is I think you're right. I think he had this moment of cognitive dissonance where he realized that these people on the right weren't saying anything more racist and were likely significantly less anti-Semitic than the parties he was going to on the left, but he just had to dehumanize them. He had to categorize them like this. And I think that so many people on the left are like this. It's like a cult, like being a Scientologist. Like you have this one day where you look around and you put it all together and you're like, when I look at the statistics, when I actually look at the information, we were the bad guys from the beginning.
Well, and keep in mind, realistically, he can't walk this back. He left his job at the mill. He sunk a year at least into this undercover reporting. He nuked his entire online footprint and removed as many photos of himself as well off the internet as much as he could. He has put everything into this. I think there's going to be a documentary and a book. He cannot. He's too path dependent at this point. Go back on this.
Yeah, and
so he's also written himself into a political corner. Even if he has realized that his side is immoderate, at the very least, there is nothing he can do.
Yeah, this reminds me of something that was said in the email where they reached out to us, where they said, well, we can connect you with the magazine Aporia that is said human biodiversity is real because you gave them strategic advice to never engage in human biodiversity stuff. And if they did, you would work with them. And
if they did, then we could not work with them.
Yeah, if they didn't disengage with HBD, we couldn't work with them.
Yes.
And they came to us with this, and I'm like, wait, so you in private meetings with other people know that we have told other people that we will never, ever, ever support human biodiversity related agendas, and you are still attempting to say that we are racist? That we are promoting racism when you know behind closed doors we are against publicly airing scientific studies and facts that could be used to promote racism. Like, you know that that's not true. You know you are the bad guys in this. But that's what gets me in all this. Okay, let's continue here. Now this I love. Speaking of aporia, I hope that this makes Aporia feel at least a bit better. I like most of Aporia's reporting. I think it's really good. Like, I don't like the HBD stuff, but I think they're one of the best scientific magazines out there right now. If you are into science, this might be like the best scientific magazine I think that I've read, minus other HBD stuff, because I think they really cut to the chase on a lot of things. Are there HDF and other organizations? Oh, sorry. Are the HDF and other organizations succeeding in shifting public opinion? Quote, disappointingly, end quote. Shulkman says, quote, certain aspects of scientific racism have taken hold in the mainstream, end quote. Aporia's predecessors in terms of white supremacist publishing, like Mankind Quarterly, were not very well read and were quite difficult to find, while Aporia's popularity has grown to the extent that a conservative MP, Neil O'Brown, approvingly shared one of their articles on his Substack last year, quote, the West fertility crisis, end quote. And you can see, like, that's the type of article of theirs that I love. They do great jobs with those articles. Shulkman points out that, quote, discussions about IQ and genetics are also animating the American presidential contest, end quote. Was Donald Trump recently telling a conservative talk show host that, quote, we got a lot of bad genes in our country right now, end quote, raising the specter of Nazi eugenics.
That sounds so like Trump. We've got a lot of bad X in this
even
country.
The Trump quote didn't say bad genes from immigrants. It said we have bad genes in our country right now. Applying general dysgenic selection, idiocracy, basically, no more racist than Mike Judd, but not that they're coming from immigrants. And here, what I will point out is the left realizes they're losing. Organizations like Hope Not Hate realize they're getting like 20 reshares with a post like this. They realize that they can spend 2 years on something and do everything they want, but everyone sees through it now. It's the same way that the big game companies, they'll release a game like Concord, they'll release a game like, and I'm sure this is going to happen with Assassin's Creed Shadows, where they release the most racist game maybe in history, which is about a black guy going around, who didn't exist, going around Japan, killing Japanese people, victimizing like innocent Japanese families, who's supposed to be the hero. And they're like, I don't understand why this would be a problem. It's a black person. They're allowed to kill any other ethnicity, aren't they? And then everyone else is like, Japan's like, no. And they're like, but it's a historic figure. And Japan's like, did you check that before you made this? And they're like, oh, I guess it's not a historic figure. Did we just make a game to like gangster rap about a black guy murdering innocent Japanese families and think that it was okay because we are so delusionally racist at this point? And
Hold
no
on,
one.
And if you're thinking anyone, even the brainwashed people at the company must have known this would lose them money.
It's not about money. It's about sending a message.
What? Sorry.
You can delete this, but my understanding is it was a real historical figure, and Assassin's Creed actually does have a history, even before the whole woke crisis, of making very woke countercultural narratives woven within their games. Consider the colonial American one, that this was a real historical black figure in Japanese history. However, it is very unlikely that he was a samurai. He was more likely kept around as a curiosity, and they're playing with that as a sort of part of the Assassin's Creed narrative.
As essentially a zoo attraction.
Yes.
Is a racist atrocity of history.
Yes.
And not be glorified in a game that they are
It's
pretending.
revisionist history, where instead of him being a zoo animal,
attraction.
they're like, let's make him cool and a samurai. They probably watched Ghost Dog, and they were like, what a cool concept, black samurai, and it's a great movie. Ghost Dog's so cool. So I think there's plausible deniability for Assassin's Creed. I like their aesthetics and I like their historical play, and so I'm hoping they're okay. I just want to say that.
if you were making this game, that the game was fundamentally racist and dehumanizing of Japanese people and their culture. You would have realized this as a random, like broadly sane
It's-
human being.
Yeah, they could have done they could have done a lot better.
No, it's not a lot better. They made a game that was racist that they were unable to see was racist because they personally dehumanized Asians. And this is across woke culture where Asians do not matter. They are
Yeah.
not human because they are in the same category as whites and Jews.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like the Jew dynamic of you can't be subject to racism if you're doing really well in society in terms of like financial outcomes.
Yeah. Now let's see what they wrote about us in this piece because you'll enjoy this completely fictional narrative here.
Okay.
Shelkman also went undercover inside the pronatalist movement, encouraging people to have more babies, though only the right kind of people having the right kind of babies.
Yeah, so like
implying that
people
we-
who want children.
No. Yeah,
please.
people who want children. We are consistent about this. He's implying that like we mean like white people should have more babies. Then what we mean is that dinks probably shouldn't be having kids, and we don't want to pressure them to have kids because they've got bad, selfish, anti-pro-social genes. We're for like pro-social, nice people who want to dedicate their lives to the future of our civilization having more babies. And they don't like that they're not in that group. So they have to recategorize everything we say as meaning something
How
else.
dare we not coerce them Handmaid's Tale style into having kids? It's their fetish. They're so
Yeah,
sad.
I love that they sent us a thing beforehand where they're like, you don't want everyone having more kids. You just want like exceptional people having more kids. And we're like, yeah, because we like define that by people who are willing to sacrifice their lives for future generations, as we have said many times in multiple videos. Anyway, global figures as powerful as Elon Musk have scaremongered about declining birth rates leading to the collapse of society. But while the pronatalist movement at large paints itself as interested in increasing fertility wholesale, Shulkman's investigations have found that, quote, the quantity of babies being born is less important than the genetic quality of their parents, end quote. Shulkman met undercover with the Collinses. This was his interpretation of our words.
Well, and also
Not
it's very rich that they would word it that way, because if parents in this movement believed that they had high genetic quality, we wouldn't be doing polygenic risk score selection.
Yeah, right. Like this is the weird thing that's always surprising me where people are like, you're having kids because you think you're genetically superior and you do polygenic selection. And I'm like, those two things are opposites. People who think that they're genetically perfect don't do genetic selection on their embryos. We
They
do
just don't
genetic
think they
selection
need it.
for cancer in our family while
Yeah.
also looking for little side nuggets. All right.
Side nuggets.
A benefit. Shulkman met undercover with the Collinses, a married white couple. Dun, 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 dun. We need to have like spooky music. Spooky, scary white couple.
Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down your spine.
You know he's the white couple, right? Like he's got a girlfriend. who's
He's got a
white
girlfriend, yeah. Well, maybe, hopefully, she'd better not be white.
Well, I'm
Just saying.
who used to be tech workers and venture capitalists, but have now dedicated their lives to becoming the most famous faces of the pronatalist movement. Though they publicly disavow racism and reject the label of eugenicists, they believe that not enough quote unquote smart people are breeding and have endorsed the racist great replacement theory, which one, we have not. Anyone who watches this show knows we do not. We endorse the greater replacement theory, which is a joke around autists having more people, a joke at the expense of great replacement theorists. So this is just factually untrue and fabrication, but should we expect anything else from leftists or from the government at this point? But yeah, we do claim that not enough smart people are having kids because like every scientific study that has ever been done shows that there's a huge correlation between intelligence and genetics, and that correlation is also directly correlated to low fertility rates. I love in their piece on this, they're like, dysgenics, a geneticist wouldn't use that term. I'm like, not a geneticist employed within the urban monoculture, but like a sane person who can see the world would. It's one of these things that's like one of these lies that the urban monoculture makes everyone tell that's like obviously like a religious thing and like not like true. Like, you know, as I've always said, like when my colleagues at Stanford are like, oh, well, yeah, I grew up poor and everything like that, but I achieved all of this through hard work and determination. And the, you know, the other people in my community didn't. I'm like, well, I mean, your genes probably played a pretty big role. And they're like, no, no, it was just me. And I'm like, well, you, Mr. whatever this guy's real name is, who went to Cambridge and who has had an incredibly easy life because of that, pretending that this unearned privilege, your genes that you had access to and other people didn't have access to, that is something that you shouldn't have to recognize when contrasting yourself with less privileged individuals. That is disgusting, and you will be remembered in the future very negatively for it. Not accepting and admitting unearned privilege you were born with is horrifying. But let's go further. Reading Shulksman's reporting on the Cullens, because he read his reporting on us, who earlier this year published a podcast episode titled, "Would taking away women's right to own property solve the fertility crisis? Question mark. By the way, the answer, that was a question mark. The answer in the episode is no, it wouldn't. We said, yes, it may cause a short-term upturns blip in fertility, but it would not serve the question long-term. But of course, they lie. Progressives always lie. Here I need to put the clip from that show that you have where they're like, yes, we lie all the time now because we're the party of lying, because we have dehumanized the other party, even though the other party doesn't lie that much anymore. And we just say, yes, we are the liar extraordinaire.
The new rules are these: attack, lie, don't get caught. Machiavelli wrote The Prince for the rulers. Well, we're rewriting it for us.
Made me wonder what he discovered about the links in the far right between white supremacy and misogyny. Quote, the statistics speak for themselves, end quote. He told me he estimated about 90% of people he met across various far right networks were men. I let the statistics speak for themselves. He estimated. Okay, so he made up a number. Quote, it was 6 months before I met a woman for this project, end quote. Well, he did come off very incel-y. Did he come off as like the most incel-y of incels? Like he's hanging out in like Ed Dutton's network. I don't know, no, sorry, nothing against Ed Dutton, but I bet his gender statistics are far to the male of our gender statistics. What?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, he chose who he engaged with. He chose to engage with dudes. There are plenty of women.
There are plenty of women in the movement.
The
like,
dissident right, the far right.
It's been like probably more than 50% women. Like, he's just probably misogynist himself and doesn't think of the women that he's meeting with as worthy of talking to. That's my guess.
Like,
look, we keep seeing this misogyny and rabid racism and dehumanization of other ethnic groups in the left. Like, it's what do you expect, right? Like with that Smithsonian thing that we've gone over in so many things.
Oh Lord!
Literally, one of their groups was like, "Well, hard work and honesty and coming to work on time. These are all white people traits." And it's like that is violently racist. And you are a mainstream government-funded left-leaning organization. Like that's insane in the United States that would put that out. Anyway, quote, the sexism in these groups is absolutely pervasive, end quote, he says. And quote, in different ways, there would be people I met more in the manosphere who listen to pickup artists podcasts, who practice ways they could hoodwink women into bed with them. Others were more trad in their outlook, whether they claim to venerate women as baby-making machines or whether they saw them as intellectually inferior creatures, end quote. Being around a, quote, a barrage of regressive and violent views, it was depressing and disappointing, end quote. It was actually interesting. When they sent out this stuff to us before this article went live, they interpreted a lot of like very normal stuff we said as racist. And I think a lot of the racism that he was experiencing was completely within his mind. One of the things they wanted to dock on is the Cullenses said behind closed doors that black people score lower on IQ tests than white people. Can you believe they would say this? And then I was like, that's just like a fact. And I gave him like the Wikipedia page on like achievement gaps. Like all civil rights organizations are trying to lower this gap. This is a fact that everyone knows. Then he's like, and they said that you shouldn't be overly broadcasting this in public. And I was like, yes, that's a fact that every civil rights advocate knows, right? You were the one who heard that and then interpreted it as blacks are inferior to whites. Not us. We didn't say that. We stated a fact that in your weird, bizarre, dehumanizing brain turned into blacks are worse than whites. And I bet you heard so many facts about women that you turned into horrifying stereotypes about women in your addled, misogynist mind. Here's an example. A conservative may state a fact. Women are more interested in being submissive in sexual situations than men are. They consume more content around submission than men do. And even when it comes to things like being choked and sexual violence, read A Billion Wicked Thoughts. It covers this very mainstream, I think it's the leftist saying, or the Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality. It's just like really clear in the statistics. This stuff is coming from women. Men did not make 50 Shades of Grey a best-selling book. Okay. Now you may hear all of those facts and hear me say men should abuse their wives. That is not what I said. I stated uncomfortable facts that we need to address. But because conservatives are the only people who tell the truth anymore, you can't stand to hear the truth and then say, and now let's find out how we deal with this. How do we build a culture that works admitting that these facts are true?
Well, and I think that's the other problem. I think one of the reasons why groups like Hope Not Hate are flailing so much to find these hate groups to expose these people is they need this community to exist because they don't actually have the agency or capability to solve the problems they propose to solve, like racial achievement gaps insofar as race is a thing, like inequality in society. They don't have the wherewithal or ability to solve these problems. And if these hate groups that they need to exist cease to exist or cease to not be real or show themselves to not be the things that they're trying to make them into, these people have nothing to do and then no one to answer for except for themselves as to why their values are not being maximized, why their initiatives are failing.
This is why we're an existential threat to them, which we've increasingly seen to be the case, because we have been very successful at actually stamping out racism in the far right of American politics. If you look at this presidential cycle versus the presidential cycle before people had a non-racist way to talk about whether it's human genetic differences, which again don't cluster under ethnic groups in an extreme way. You can watch any of our episodes on this, and where they do have any clustering there, they change so quickly. With like the average person in the developed world going to be one standard deviation lower in IQ. Watch our episode on Idiocracy if you want to learn more about that. Like ethnic differences wouldn't matter if that was the case, right? So like none of this stuff matters. And when we fight all of this with facts and evidence, when we point out you don't need to worry about Latin Americans replacing us, they have like a super low fertility rate. Latin America fell below replacement rate collectively back in 2019 and is falling way faster than the US. Latin America is getting close to Korea levels in many, many countries. Like the situation in Latin America is bad. And then groups are like, oh, I used to think I needed to worry about like Latin American immigrants, but I now realize that we're just sending them to cities where they're having their fertility shredded. Like they're as much of victims by the urban monoculture as us. And they're a bunch of tradcast families. Yeah, we should work together. And this is partially why Latin American families are moving over. And not just tradcast. A lot of them are converting to Protestantism, converting to mainstream American culture.
Mm-hmm.
As they move to the right to defend their children from these, scary groups, these groups are now realizing, oh my God, the scary like nutter actual like people with like actually unpalatable opinions on the right, with like Nick Fuentes around race and stuff like that, they've disappeared from the public narrative. They're gone. The racists are gone. They left the building. Now the right is the side of equality. And you can see this in the data, and we have been for the long time, because you can see that the more right-wing a district was historically, the smaller the gap between both IQ and earnings between its ethnic minority population, be they Black or Hispanic, and its white population.
That's the crazy thing. If you actually want to address achievement gaps, if you're actually looking to what groups are reducing achievement gaps when it comes to earning, educational attainment, likely intelligence tests, but this hasn't been looked at. Oh no, it's conservative groups. Oh no.
Oh no, they're the only ones who, when a lesbian woman comes to you and says, I keep getting assaulted by men claiming to be women on women's dating apps. Can I please have one dating app where people can't just claim to be trans? And I'm not even saying that trans people can't be on the app. I'm just saying non-passing trans people can't be on the app. That was the case in the Australian court case about
Oh,
this, where
tickle versus giggle.
where the woman got sued. She had she allowed trans people on the app. They just had to be passing. They used a face recognition thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I can understand why a lesbian would want that. And they're
Yeah.
like, shut up, you disgusting woman. Let the men make decisions about what you lesbians get to say is safe. If you say you don't feel safe going to your nightclubs because now there's random men who have learned they can just claim to be trans, I don't believe that a sex pest would do that. And it's like, why would a sex pest not do that if you give them permission to? I'm not saying trans people don't exist. I'm saying that if you uncritically accept anyone who says they're trans as trans, sex pests will use this to harass lesbian women.
Mm.
You stopped protecting women. You stopped protecting gay men when you allowed people to use their identity to push agendas that hurt children. And gay men, they don't want this. They're not on board with this. And yet you claim to speak for all of them when almost half of them don't support you anymore in the US. They were the ones who won all these rights. They were the vast majority of the early gay rights, LGBT rights, activists. But let's continue here. One of the most significant ways the far right is succeeding is in making the more extreme views palatable to the mainstream is by scapegoating migrants during a cost of living crisis and blaming them for Britain's decline. Did Shulkman come away from his investigation with a better sense of how so many men are getting radicalized? Quote, there are various explanations for radicalization, some of them competing ones, he says, end quote. Though the one he favors most is called, quote, significant quest theories, end quote. So keep in mind, he just dismissed that immigrants have anything to do with the cost of living crisis. He's like, this has nothing to do with anything, nothing to do with the economy, nothing to do with the amount you get paid for a job. The number of people competing for a job has nothing to do with how much you're earning for that job. That is just a denial of reality.
He's a journalist, not an economist, Malcolm. Give him a break.
He's a psyops guy and not somebody who has your best interest at heart. But let's see what he does think is leading people to the right, or the idea that people's needs for social standing and belonging can lead them to extreme beliefs. Oh, they're just not loved enough. People who are, quote, knocked by a difficult experience, end quote, can lose sight of their own value in the world. Maybe they've fallen into alcoholism, or their family was torn apart during a divorce. Quote, devastating setbacks, quote, like that, Shulkman says, quote, can shake your feeling of personal significance, and you want to get it back. And some people will seek to get it back in extreme ways, end quote. Except we know the mental health stats, you knob. All of the mental health problems are way, 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 way bigger on the left. You guys are barely able to keep yourselves from sticking a knife in your throat every morning. If you look at left-wing white women under the age of 30 in the United States, over half of them have a major mental health problem. The more the urban monoculture infiltrates a group like the LGBT community, the more likely they are to attempt to unalive themselves. And you can say, well, that's because they're oppressed. Well, if it's because they're oppressed, why has the rate been going up as you guys have gained more power? Why has the rate been going up as their rights have increased? It's because it's not because they're oppressed. It's because your entire social system is killing them.
Just so you understand how severe this trend is, not only has Pew data, since the data started recording happiness levels on the Democrats in the United States versus Republicans in the US, always said that Republicans were significantly happier. But recently an AI was trained to determine people's political affiliation by looking at their face. And it did two composite images. It could determine it with 60% accuracy. And the two core things that differentiated right-leaning faces was that they looked happier and that the women were more attractive.
It's killing the people it touches. When you tell somebody You just need to live your life doing whatever makes you feel good in the moment and be affirmed for whatever you want to believe about yourself and never have to experience a single negative emotional stimuli. Because what are trigger warnings? What is their panic around Botgate, around us saying that corporal punishment is good? And the research obviously says it's good. If you look at the research, it's like modern. A new study came out recently on this. And just keep being vindicated. The vindicators. If you're wondering why they come to adopt these beliefs, when you remove any negative stimuli for them and you just tell them to do whatever makes them happy in the moment, be validated for whatever you want to believe about yourself. And then somebody with a degree in neuroscience, who has been published in the field, who has an exhibit still on display at the Smithsonian, who has worked at UT Southwestern, a very respected medical institution in this field. Like, people are like, did you work as a neuroscientist? Yes, I worked in neuroscience for 4 years. And then I worked adjacent to neuroscience and brain computer interface for 2 years. I have extensive experience in this field. If I told you, well, if you actually look at the research and not like the weird lefty capture stuff, I could tell you that if you remove any negative emotional experience for someone, they're going to become hypersensitized to them and freak out whenever they encounter them, which is why things like trigger warnings and removal of corporal punishment and removal of exposing yourself to negative stimuli cause a severe negative backlash. And they're like, wait, we are the ones causing all the mental pain? That can't be the truth. And I'm like, really? Just look at like mainstream psychology textbooks, anything other than like from the past 15 years or so, and you'll see that like we used to always know this. All of the data always pointed this out. Like, you shouldn't be doing this. You should not be removing negative emotional stimuli from people. And yet you built an entire cultural ecosystem, because that's what the urban monoculture is, that's dedicated to this. But anyway, what are your thoughts, Simone?
I'm really alarmed that this does seem to have government association. I thought things were kept at least a little separate, some separation of church versus state, because ultimately, the urban monoculture is a religion in the end.
To understand what she means when she says that, when I talk about the areas where they just deny both observable reality and science, I mentioned a few here. A great example of this is like trans people in sports. Anyone can look at a picture of Leah Thomas and be like, that person obviously had the same advantage a male would have, maybe slightly diminished rate of hormones, competing in that competition. I can look at the studies. I can look at the difference in her results when she identified as a man versus when she identified as a woman, and just see, yeah, she had a huge advantage. And to say otherwise is a religious belief, because it goes against observable reality, it goes against common sense, and it goes against scientific data.
Have you actually ever met Heather Swanson?
No, I've never competed against her before, no.
She's not exactly your average trans athlete.
Honestly, I find that kind of bigoted, David.
Okay. Heather Swanson is actually joining us now. Miss Swanson, how does it feel to be competing today?
Now that I can compete as female, I'm ready to smash the other girls.
But continue.
I'm scared. I'm scared about it. I mean, just even going through this podcast and realizing there are so many things and examples that we can't even reference at this point because of already how much things are being censored. I have my doubts about how the future is going to play out now. And I am more concerned than before. I think a lot of people who've already been affected by this for a long time are like, I told you so. This is really bad. My hope is that perhaps with the US election, we could see a tide turning. I think that with some...
They were already seeing a tide turning. They got rid of the old conservative party and replaced them with this, I forgot what it's called, the new party, but they're like actual conservatives.
Yeah.
Like,
so maybe we'll see a market correction of all this. And if that happens, that is great,
I don't think, no, I think that we're seeing a market correction in terms of public sentiment. I think the public now knows the concentration camps are active. They're up in arms about it, but the cult has stronger and stronger control of it ever did than the sources of power of our society, whether it's government bureaucracy or the bureaucracy of large companies. The only thing we can do is replace them or recapture these institutions or run reconquistas on these institutions. That means people in positions of power need to hire consultants like us. Like, we're willing to do this for you. We have antibigot.com that eventually will turn into a consultant website to go through any of your organizations and run DEI remediation. Remove the individuals who are promoting bigotry, hate, racism, sexism, xenophobia, and calling it anything other than those things. Because unlike the classic DEI consultants who promote this type of bigotry, we don't come in and make you lose money. We come in and help you remove people. We come in and help you cut the fat. And we only take money based on how much fat we cut successfully, by the way, without losing you money.
Yeah, well, okay, so there's a hope. I don't know. I'm just
there is a hope, but people like us, we need to
there's
continue to
hope,
grow.
not hate.
You guys
in the
need to
future.
like and subscribe. Like
Yes,
and
please.
subscribe. Okay.
Please like and describe. Yes, that would be appreciated.
I love you, Simone. You are
I love
a
you too.
great wife. And it's so funny when I hear him be like, oh, these people are desperate. I know nobody on the right who comes across as like mentally unwell. Like none of the major figures, except for like the ones who have been sort of isolated from the movement, like Nick Fuentes, who like doesn't really talk to any of the mainstream players. But like the people that they've been trying to cancel recently, you know, your Johnny Anomalies, your raw egg nationalists, they all seem like super like mentally healthy, happy people with spouses and you know, like
Who are
they
trying to do good in the world and
trying to make the world a better place for their kids.
well,
Like
and
that
and at great personal risk, which makes them more admirable because now that I see in greater clarity what they're up against. And one, I mean, I do understand why they started out trying to be anonymous. I think maybe when they first started posting, we lived in an age where it was maybe possible to be anonymous. But I mean, now that I see like how much people are being attacked, I get it.
well, and you can see how these groups twist reality. So someone like Kevin
Yeah.
Dolan, right? Kevin Dolan, one of the sweetest guys I've ever met. Maybe he said something racist in the past. I don't know. That doesn't mean that that's who he is today. And I would point out that the areas where they have quote unquote caught him for saying racist things, it turns out they were just lying. Like
Mhm.
in the piece where they point out, he said that they said Kevin Dolan said Jews were nexus of evil. They published this twice in two different pieces. The actual tweet said the county of Santa something in Florida. It's the county where Fort Lauderdale is the
Oh.
nexus of evil. And
Man,
they
we would just say all of Florida is the nexus of
he didn't know
evil.
he didn't know the Jewish population of that county. They then decided to interpret that through their incredibly anti-Semitic, racist view of reality as Jews. Now, this organization didn't. Some other crazy person online decided to, and then this organization, uncritically, without looking for the source tweet, decided to just regurgitate. If it fit their own biases and prejudices, they're willing to regurgitate it. Now, they've since corrected this, which I appreciate. Let's see if they correct other things, like saying that we support great replacement theory, which we never have.
Well, that
And he
wasn't
was
Hope Not Hate.
reporting-
That was the mill that did that. But
Yeah,
we'll
that was
see
a
if
mill
they
that did that.
respond
Yeah.
to.
No, great. What they do still have on their site about us, which is just factually untrue, is they say bad genes are coming into the country. They say bad genes are having more kids and bad genes are coming into the country. We have never said bad genes are coming into the country. We have said actually good genes are coming into the country. If anybody has watched like any of our immigration stuff, I
Yeah,
say
because
the
we talk
United
about
States
like
is
the
a
selective
benefit.
pressures it played. Basically, to immigrate in many cases requires a level of, we'll say, fitness. You could argue genetic fitness that is quite high, and that the populations that immigrate are typically the smarter, the educated,
Now
the
this is true on
ambitious.
first squeeze immigrants. I will say I won't say all immigrants fall into this camp. You know, when you're talking about refugees and stuff like
Well,
that.
no, especially and there are different types of immigrants. If you're talking about a population of immigrants that is going somewhere to get completely supported by the government and proceed to not work, you're not selecting for the most agentic, high achieving people, because those aren't those people. If you are talking about a group of people who, through great personal risk, came to another foreign land that they weren't familiar with, and then it proceeded to attempt to build a life for themselves and make their own income there and generate tax revenue and build a family there, that's more than I've done.
Yeah, and I would say that a lot of these people, they just can't handle the reality that most of the right is actually pretty pro legal immigration of high skilled immigrants.
100%.
Even
Yeah.
Trump tried to pass a law that would make it easier for them to immigrate into the country, and the leftists killed it.
Well, and his current policy is if you get a college degree in the US, you should.
Any college degree in the US, you automatically get citizen. That is
I don't know. I don't know if it's
remarkably
citizen. I
easy.
think it's like green card or something, or like
No,
track
I
to
think it's that
citizenship.
citizenship. I think it was that severe. It might be green card, but
No,
basically
I mean,
this
he definitely,
policy-
he's trying to say like we welcome outsiders who are willing to contribute to the United States, and I think that's the big issue, and that is kind of the issue with immigration across the world, is that they're there is a need in many, many, many nations for these people who are willing to immigrate and contribute and build. And there's a lot of damage being incurred by countries who have very generous social services that then subsequently support people who are not willing to contribute. And that's a big struggle.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And it's just sad that it's reached this stage that the enemy of pluralism, the enemy of freedom, the enemy of fair democratic processes, because there is nothing you can say but that this organization is not pro fair democratic processes if it's using money to support one party and attack another party, public money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
is the urban monoculture. It is the left, and all you guys can do is vote.
Yeah, wherever you are in the world, vote. Vote. Well, both vote politically and also with your pocketbook. Support organizations, products, services, and politicians who.
Anyone watching this is in the Trump administration, let us know. We want to work. We want to help dismantle this thing. You don't need to pay us. I just want a future for my children that isn't the fascist dictatorship that the Democrats are currently working towards. Just appointing Kamala. I love that. Just like we don't, we don't do primaries anymore. That's for the oligarchs to decide.
Oh, well.
Anyway, love you
so
much.
Malcolm, I love you. And I also wish all the best to the real Chris Morton.
Whatever his name is. I don't
wherever you are, dude.
Overly doxxed.
Yeah. And we didn't put your fake passport on the internet attempting to hurt you anyway. We have very good reason to believe
that. To prove that there is this connection here,
yes.
And it seems like the best way to do it. If you actually were just breaking the law,
you wouldn't have done that if you were actually just breaking the law, because you are not. You're a smart person, and we know that.
Yeah, you went to Cambridge. You wouldn't take that risk. I don't believe that somebody did that would take that risk.
Exactly.
And I will say,
we wish you all the best.
It's very important that the people we have named in this episode, that you don't, find their addresses, find their personal information.
Yeah, don't
add
harass
them
people
to lists or anything like that. That's really a bad thing to do. That's
it's a bad use of already strapped resources. Like when we had CPS come to our house, all I felt was just mortified that they could be helping someone else. Like they could be helping children who really needed help, and they were sitting there. They had to go through our entire house, go through our fridge, go through everything else. And they knew it was fine, but they had to come out because people reported us so much. So yeah, don't play those games. You're not just hurting the people involved. You're hurting the local government. You're draining resources, and goodness knows we don't need any more of that in this world. So thank you. Yeah. And what am I making you for dinner tonight?
Do we still have some meat left over from yesterday, right?
No, I don't think but I can make you more with less Penang sauce this time. So I know
yes, please. It was very good. And I absolutely loved your pie.
And did you want that with cornmeal muffins?
Yeah, cornmeal muffins would go great with that.
Okay.
Cornmeal muffins, so people know, this is slow cooked beef with Penang sauce. Slow cooked until it's like a mush, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Penang sauce, so it's like a forever soup meat with a lot of vegetables in it. And then we're going to put that on cornmeal muffins. And then for dessert, describe the cake you made because it's so good.
Ooh, we can put the recipe in the description. I asked Perplexity for a pumpkin cake because we had bought a bunch of decorative pumpkins, and I just cut them open with the kids, and we made.
No, you hadn't even bought them. You got them for free at a local fair.
Yeah, we got them for free at a local fair, so that's perfect. Freebie pumpkins to make. Now we harvest our food from local events, and yeah, just ask Perplexity to make recipes for what's in the house. And so we made this with a buttercream frosting because we didn't have cream cheese in the house. We have lots of butter, and they are amazing. So and this is for our daughter's birthday. So
and you made the frosting from scratch too, not
yeah, and I will share the recipe for both, for the pumpkin cake and the buttercream pumpkin frosting. Highly recommend. They're really good. And I worked at a cupcake shop for like a year. I've had a lot of cupcakes and a lot of cake, and it's really good. So AI makes great recipes.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, final thought before we head out. And I was just thinking, like, he's met these people, like to say that they went to the far right because they lost all hope or something like that, or like were alcoholics or like didn't have a family. Like, he knows us. He knows that we chose to give up careers in venture capital and private equity, good careers. You have a graduate degree from Cambridge. I have a graduate degree from Stanford to pursue this because we believe it's what's right. You can look at somebody like Elon, what he's given up to pursue this. You can look at
it's not
somebody
like
like
he
Kevin
lives
Dolan.
a fun
He worked at,
life.
like,
I mean, maybe it's fun and
McKinsey.
interesting,
I
but he's
don't
not
remember. He
happy.
worked for like BlackRock. He worked for some big organization like that.
Yeah.
He left to go do this. A lot of us are actually really high-skilled professionals who voluntarily left that life and the privileges that came with it to try to make the world a better place. You don't see this on the left.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Love you. Bye.
Bye. Love you. Wait, what are you wishing about?
A little bit scared.
Okay.
I'm gonna blow it.
Go ahead.
Wow, we're so. Wow, why was this so